I started binge drinking when I moved to boarding school, and I got in trouble kind of early. I was asked to leave the boarding school. That's kind of when I started to see that I had drank despite the consequences that happened. When I started drinking, I kept thinking about how I wanted more and how I thought this is the way life should be. I felt so connected. I thought that's just what life was about. And I looked forward to the next time that I was going to drink.
Substance use disorder touches all our lives, and often we feel hopeless or frustrated in our pursuit to understand how and why it happens.
Welcome to APC Recovery Cafe, where we discuss the topics and trends around substance use, provide education and resources, offer recovery support, and also discuss prevention tactics, all through the stories of the people who have been there.
We invite you to grab your favorite coffee or tea and join us for a variety of guests that will bring understanding, information, connection, and hope.
Together, we can break the stigma and pave a brighter future for each other.
Hey folks, welcome into this episode of APC Recovery Cafe. I'm Art Wimberly. I'm one of your co-hosts, and I'm a person grateful to be in long-term recovery. And Carrie Wimberly is our other host today. Carrie, hey.
Hey, Art. That sounds strange.
It does.
It does, yes.
We are married,
Yes,
correct? Yes.
correct,
Okay.
yes. So I'm Carrie, and I am the Executive Director of the Addiction Prevention Coalition. We're so glad you've joined us today. And today we have a special guest with us, Raven Johnson. Welcome, Raven.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
And Raven is our new Director of Student Initiatives. And she has been at APC in the past, and now she's back, and we'll talk about that and explain all that in just a minute. But to start off, Raven, you have a special, delicious-looking beverage. So tell us what that is.
Yes, it's a Starbucks salted caramel sweet cream cold brew.
Oh,
Wow.
You talk about adjectives.
I know, 3 adjectives. I'm going to have to buy one now.
So, cold brew, is that your choice? I mean, is that your beverage of choice?
Typically, yes. I'll drink hot coffee in the morning, but anytime I'm going out, I'll get a cold brew.
Okay, I need to try cold brew, and I love that. I have a sweet thing. I love sweets. Art's not much of he's a salty, but that cream sitting on the top, is that like heavy cream, or is that? Oh, that's the cream part of the drink.
Yes.
Okay.
So every sip you take, you get the sweet cream first, followed by the strong coffee.
Oh,
So you get a little bit of everything.
wow,
Kind of like life.
that's pretty good, Art.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we want to kind of delve into your past a little bit, and because we know that it informs your present, and let you tell us a little bit about your story, and then ultimately we want to get to why you're doing what you do today, and telling everybody a little bit of what you do as the Director of Student Initiatives at APC. But Art, you want to?
Yeah. So I can imagine, Raven, that you didn't grow up thinking you were going to work in the field of addiction prevention. Is that
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about your story, as Carrie said, informed what you do now? Take us back. Tell us about childhood and growing up, and then where substance abuse or substance use disorder kind of entered the picture.
Yeah. So I'm a person of long-term recovery myself for alcoholism and substance use disorder. Growing up, I started to realize that I struggled with depression and anxiety. In middle school, I was pulled out to be homeschooled by my mom because I was being bullied. And that's kind of when I started to develop an eating disorder as a way to control my external world, to change how I feel inside.
Yeah.
So my parents kind of caught on to that, and we had a talk, and they helped me change my eating patterns, but I still felt really anxious and depressed, and I didn't really know what it was.
So they weren't really addressing that part, didn't know how to address that part of it.
Yeah, I think they were doing the best that they could,
Yeah.
but it wasn't what I needed.
Was that traumatic, pulling you out?
Yeah, it was, because I was pulled away from my friends, so I really just saw my family every day. I played soccer and was an athlete, so I saw teammates, but actually when I had my eating disorder, I had to stop exercising for a while, so I couldn't
Wow.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So okay, and that was middle school.
mhm.
Okay, so then the drinking started sometime around that
Yeah.
period of time.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it was a few years later when I was 16.
Okay.
We moved and I was back into public school.
Okay.
And I started drinking a little bit after my parents' divorce. And it was with my peers. But from then, I realized that I really liked the way it made me feel. I felt so connected. And I thought, like, at last, this is what life is supposed to feel like. This is,
So relieve some of the anxiety, kept you from going into the depressive states, or at least temporarily.
yeah. A lot of people said I was self-medicating.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's such a constant theme, you know, when people share their stories, is the use of the substance early gives that feeling of this is what life is supposed to feel like,
Yeah.
and also gives a sense of I can relate to others better in this state than I can without it. Was that
Yeah.
you too? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely felt like I could relate to others and just got more talkative and just excited.
Yeah.
When did consequences start coming into play with your use?
Yeah, so my senior year of high school, I was at boarding school at this point in time, and I got in trouble for drinking on campus in the dorms, and I was asked to leave. So I moved back home with my parents at public school, and that was the first time I got in trouble. Stopped drinking for a while, and then a few weeks before I graduated high school, I was arrested for a minor in possession of alcohol. So I felt really terrible. I was very embarrassed. The day after I got arrested, I actually went to school the next day, and everybody had my mugshot on their phones.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So up until that point, that was the worst day of my life.
Oh,
Yeah.
And this was at a time even before, I guess, the preponderance of social media like it is today, where that would have been broadcast even more. But it was enough that your peers saw, right?
Yeah. It was very quick that they were all talking about it, and I got out of jail like a few hours before.
Oh,
Wow.
goodness.
Yeah.
So you were able to, I mean, how grades and such, were you able to maintain that even through high school, or how did that affect performance?
Yeah, I made straight A's. I had a job, sometimes two, even in high school.
Wow.
And then I went to college at UAB and was still seeming to manage well, good grades. And I think that was an excuse that I used a lot. Like, I can drink, I don't have a problem because I still have all these things together.
Manageability.
Right.
Yeah. There's something interesting I always find interesting about your story is what you were studying or majoring in at UAB. Tell us what that was.
Yeah, so I studied public health and psychology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Some of these threads are starting to come together.
Yeah, and no idea that I would end up in the substance use field at the time.
Yeah.
Didn't think I had a problem with substance use at the time.
Isn't it? It's amazing, but it happens way more often than not that people that are struggling and do have a problem with substance use disorder can fool themselves for so long.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is because they can manage certain areas of life pretty well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about college career then. I'm sure it went really smoothly, right?
Yeah, I actually got like diagnosed with depression and anxiety in college, was on antidepressants, went to therapy a few times, but it didn't really work because I wasn't being honest with my use.
Okay.
But, I lost a lot of friendships at times, got in a lot of arguments, blacked out, started using different substances and mixing them with alcohol. But I didn't really have many consequences until, after I graduated, and it got to the point to where I couldn't go to work because I was drinking so early, or I was just constantly shaking, having anxiety attacks because I was going through withdrawals. My brain was there's a lot of imbalances going on because I felt like I was like constantly on a roller coaster emotionally.
Yeah. So blackout drinking?
Yeah. I would wake up a lot and not remember where all I went the night before, or, if my car was in the driveway, I didn't know how it got there.
Wow.
You know, I'd have bruises from falling, just a lot of embarrassing stuff that, you know, I woke up and I was ashamed. I didn't want to do it again, but I somehow did, and it was out of my control.
Anybody around you pointing anything out about it, or?
Yeah, a lot of my friends were concerned. My employer, I was waiting tables. They started pointing it out, and definitely my parents. My dad and stepmom sat down with me and, you know, told me that they were concerned, and they were very scared. But at the time, I didn't take it that way. I was definitely playing the victim and just was in a lot of self-pity. But it wasn't long after that to where I kind of got desperate enough to go to treatment for the first time.
So what was treatment like for you?
You know, when I went, I thought that they were going to show me how I could control my drinking, because I thought that was a thing.
So it wasn't about sobriety.
No.
It was how can I manage?
Yes.
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 Okay.
And I thought it was just all like trauma, like PTSD, depression. Like if I could just get that under control, then I could, you know, control how much I drank. But I very quickly, you know, became willing and open-minded to what the professionals there were saying. And they were like, you know, you really don't have control. Like, look at all these times that have happened where you said you weren't going to do it again, and you did. So I went to sober living after treatment the first time, started working a 12-step program, but I didn't get it right away. I ended up having a relapse that was about a week long, a little less than a year, and I went back to treatment a second time.
Okay. Anything different about the second treatment? Did anything kick you? Did you carry anything forward from the first one?
Yes, absolutely. So like the second time I went, I had seen other people in long-term recovery and saw the hope in them. So I knew what I had to do when I got out. And I also, like, I wasn't in delusion about my drinking. Like, I knew that I needed to stop and find a way to stay sober long-term. Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that we really focus on at APC is trying to break stigma and shame. So I'm interested to know, like, as you reflect on your story and your use, do you think that had an impact on not getting help sooner? Or was it just that you really were in denial about your amount of use? Was there a shame factor in your story?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I just didn't want to disappoint people around me. And you think of an alcoholic or somebody that has issues with substance use disorder, that they're much older. And I was 22 years old the first time I went to treatment. So imagining a life without drinking from then on out seemed impossible.
Right.
Yeah. And then also, like, thinking you have to lose everything in order to get help.
Yeah, the hitting the rock bottom or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that played a role into me not asking for help.
Yeah. And I think, you know, going to your parents and saying, you know, you're having some sort of health struggle, even going to your parents and talking about depression is easier than going to your parents and saying, I've got issues with substances, you know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we're trying to educate on, so that people can get help earlier, going and talking to somebody and saying, I may have a problem, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, second time in treatment. And then what happened outside? Sober living after that, or no?
I went back home. I was with my dog, went back to the same job that I had waiting tables, and really the 12 steps is what has kept me sober. I really delve into those steps with my sponsor, worked through them like my life depended on it, and still do today. I started sponsoring other women when I was just a couple of months sober, even though it was terrifying. And it's, you know, today I spent my whole weekend meeting with other sponsees.
Wow.
It's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, because what you're speaking about from start to finish and continuing is community, right? Working the steps, but working them in community groups, sponsor, and then sponsoring keeps you engaged in community, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of, I think, whether it's intended or not, kind of begins to break the stigma down, Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's when we first go to a group, it's a safe place to talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And eventually it becomes more normalized where we can talk about it in other settings. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah. Definitely getting engaged in the Birmingham recovery community, and we kind of have like a collective where we speak publicly together, and like the End Addiction Walk. A lot of that, I would say, helps break the stigma.
So coming forward, studied what now? Psychology and
Public health.
Public health.
Yeah.
Okay. And then your particular story is as a girl growing up, middle school, teenager, you're struggling, you got the mental health issues of anxiety and depression. And so now that you're sober and have been productive for a few years, it's kind of like your heart is for people like yourself growing up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's led into the student initiatives. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, and so how did you get to APC?
Yeah.
So I really wanted to use my degree after going to treatment the second time, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I applied for AmeriCorps.
And tell us what that is.
So I always compare it to the Peace Corps, but it's here in the U.S. It's a year-long commitment where you get assigned like a social services type job, getting paid at the federal poverty line, and you get like some of your student debt paid for if you complete the year. But you can do it, like I applied for places in Moab, Utah and Colorado, and even interviewed over the phone with them, but then I interviewed with APC.
Got stuck in Birmingham, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my heart just, I felt like that's where I needed to be. I just had this intuition, and here we are, like 3-ish years later,
Yep.
and I'm still here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you came in as AmeriCorps Vista,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe you were like a student specialist. Is
Yes.
that? Yes.
Yes.
That's the role you came in under a different director of student initiatives, Angela, who we love so much. And you were doing a lot of things that we didn't want to do, like activity sheets and invoices and like an intern.
Yeah.
But you got to sit under somebody that's doing student work and start to help and start to see the science of prevention in the student space.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that a little bit as you experienced that and as you went into the schools and learning about prevention. What was that like?
Yeah. So I started having like my own in-focus chapters that I was kind of over. So I would go into high schools once a month and really got to meet these students that were trying to prevent substance use in their schools with their peers and having conversations. And they were interested in topics like depression, suicide prevention. And I just really loved that because that wasn't something I talked about in my high school days. So I never expected to enjoy working with students like that, but I felt like I could relate to them, and I, told my recovery story to some of them, and I've seen them, like a lot of them graduate high school and like go off into college. So I was under Angela, the director of student initiatives at that time, and she kind of started showing me like we were applying for a grant, the SPF PFS grant, and I kind of helped her collect data, and I just began to get more and more curious. And we ended up getting that grant.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. And after I finished my year as an AmeriCorps Vista, I started a role under that grant.
Yeah. And then eventually ended up in the project management role of that grant.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to share with you my observation of watching you from the time that you came in to over those couple of years. So, Raven was really quiet, and she was a little withdrawn, and she was an incredible worker, and I could tell she was so smart and brilliant in thinking about things, absorbing things, but insecure, unsure of what she could do, should do. But as she began to work in the space, and as Angela began to give her more and more, and she experienced this. But then what happened was her husband got a job outside the state, and so she resigned and moved with him. And so now Raven is the only person that knows really anything about student work at APC. And you talking about a bloom. I mean, she just started to bloom. So I don't know whether it was both the foundation that you had been given, and then the opportunity presented itself. But wow, what took place was a transformation. So it was beautiful. I don't know if you felt that. Were you experiencing something like that in the work?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I came in, I was so clueless because I was changing in my recovery and kind of discovering who I am and like what my purpose is. But being able to experience that while doing the work that APC does was just like mind blowing.
Yeah, beautiful to watch. So then you came to me one day and said, Carrie, I need to tell you something. But you had been talking for some time about going back to school. And so the opportunity presented itself. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I had been considering going back to school to get my master's of social work for a while, and I had talked about it. And then like the pandemic happened, and I just felt really moved to apply, and I did. And I got into Alabama A&M, which is where I'm at now. And they had an opioid impacted families program, which is it aligns with what APC does. But
so tell me a little bit about the program.
Yeah, because that's
I'm
relatively new in
Yeah.
higher education,
yeah,
isn't it?
Yes. So A&M got a HRSA grant where the goal is to train more social work professionals to go out into the substance use field. And it's not just treatment, but it's thinking of substance use like the families that it impacts, like the whole environment. So what they do, if you get into the fellowship, you have to do 2 different internships at a substance use related field. And they also do continuing education opportunities that are opioid impacted families related. So,
And there's no shortage of those families right now at this time in history, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So basically you left APC
Mm-hmm.
to pursue your degree,
Mm-hmm.
secondary degree. And then we find ourselves with an opening in the student space, and it just was at the same time as the End Addiction Birmingham Walk, which Raven's like, hey, I want to volunteer. We're like, we need you to volunteer. So here we are freezing at the walk, and then it's like, wait a minute, we have somebody sitting right here. Is there a way that we can make this work? Because you got an internship
Yeah.
need, and we have a director of student initiatives need. And fortunately, after lots of conversation and working with A&M, we're able to combine those two.
Yes.
And you just rejoined us.
Yes. It's amazing how that worked out so perfectly. But yeah, I needed my second internship, and we were able to get it approved to where I can spend the next year at APC in the Director of Student Initiatives role.
And finish out your school at the same time.
Yes.
Wow. So what has it been coming back? You've been back 3-4 weeks?
A little over a month.
A little over a
This
month.
week will be a month.
Okay.
So there's a lot of new faces. APC has gotten a lot more opportunities. And when I left, the pandemic was still kind of going on. A lot of stuff wasn't in person. So we had our first huddle, and the list of things that we were talking about was like stuff we have tried to plan for like over a year when I was there. And it's like actually happening now. So it's been amazing to watch things be implemented and have all these like new, curious people that are like willing to work and also so passionate about addiction, because everybody has their own story that works at APC.
Yep. Really cool.
I was wondering, I've noticed in my own life when I'm in a space for a while and then am removed from it for whatever reason and experience something outside of it and then come back into that space, that I bring a new perspective. Have you noticed anything like that, being away from APC for a little bit, connecting to A&M to do your master's work? Any perspective you're bringing back in maybe that's a little different or new?
Yeah. I've had experience working or interning at a opioid treatment center. So I've seen like the one-on-one treatment side with people that are actually diagnosed with substance use disorder, whereas before it was more like prevention based. And then I have like my own recovery perspective. So it's kind of like I can see things from so many different angles.
Wow, that's cool.
So it's been different coming back for sure.
That's good, because you're still relatively young and you've had a lot of experience now, just your personal experience, then your recovery experience, APC, and then now the education.
Yeah.
And as you said, seeing it one-on-one, you're starting to blend all those things, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I feel like I've seen, like working with students, I know that a lot of like maybe their parents are struggling with substance use. So I'm kind of like seeing their parents' angle from like the treatment side and just seeing how it impacts the whole system, impacts entire communities.
It's amazing. So as we wrap up, I don't want to exclude your exercise, running, because I find it fascinating what you do and how much you do and all that. So have you always loved nature, being out in nature? Is that something that's been a part of you from the beginning? And then tell us about when did the running start, and then the trail running, and then the marathoning, and then all of that. So walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So I've said, I was a soccer player since I was in elementary school. I ran cross country in high school. So athletics have always been a part of my life. Nature, my dad's really taught me to love nature through hiking with him.
Nice.
We go on camping trips to the Smokies a lot. But once I, got sober, I wanted to run a marathon really bad. So I started training for that. And I, was pretty miserable during my marathon. But things kind of have shifted, and I started trail running during the pandemic. And then I was like, I want to try something further and more extreme. So I started training for an ultra marathon, which is like anything above 26.2 miles. So
Wow.
In the past couple of years, I've ran several 50Ks, a 12-hour challenge, and I'm training. I eventually want to run a 100-mile race.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Yeah, it's a lot of training, but there's a whole community here in Birmingham that's really passionate about it, and we like support each other and go to each other's races. So that's one of my hobbies that's kind of grown throughout my recovery.
Wow.
Do you view it as part of your recovery? Is it a spiritual aspect to it? Or?
There is definitely a spiritual aspect to it. It has played a big role in my recovery. I feel very connected to something greater than me. And I just feel like the possibilities are limitless. Feel very connected to God. And I get in like a meditative state of flow where I can just, focus on the present, which has been very hard for me to do in the past.
It's hard for most people, but especially folks with substance use disorder recovery, being present is a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's fantastic. Carrie, anything else you want to talk with Raven about?
Just glad and excited to be able to work with you again. It's been a joy just being a part of watching your sobriety grow and strengthen, and then that growth of passion that you have turned, and the way that you deal with students, the way you love the students. I mean, that's one of the things that I've learned working at APC is having the right person in that seat, because the kids know if we care about them or not. Mm-hmm. And when they know that we care about them, then they're so engaged. So thank you for being that person. Thank you for taking the risk of coming back to a place that you have been and left. And I know that, took some thinking, and I can't wait to see where you end up. And I know it's going to be somewhere where there's mountains.
Yes.
That you can run up and down them.
Yes. Thank you.
She has pictures of, I know Colorado and Rocky Mountains. She's got mountains in her soul. Yeah. So,
as we close, I was just wondering if there was someone in a school system around that was listening to this Is there anything you would say to them to encourage them about the kinds of things you guys at APC and you can do with students in schools? Is there one aspect of that you would encourage people to take a look at?
Yeah, I mean, if there's like a teacher or someone that's just wanting to bring awareness to their students about these topics, we do have in-focus chapters that we can start. There's student-led, adult-guided groups that meet, and they get to decide what they want to talk about. So it's not a cookie fitter group. It's whatever you need. You know, we can bring the information. We can do activities around it, campaigns in the schools. We also have mental health first aid trainers. So if you want to get more educated on the signs and symptoms of what a mental health challenge might look like and how to connect somebody to resources, we can train you on that. Whether you're a student or a teacher, we can get that coordinated.
That's great. And as always, those types of services, trainings, and help from APC are free to the schools,
Yes.
to the organization. And I love the way you blend this idea. It's not just about drugs or substance use, mental health issues, right? Catalyst issues, all the types of things that students really actually want to talk about at an adult level.
Yeah.
Sweet, good. Well, join us next time for APC Recovery Cafe and the insight on another fabulous drink. See you.
One of the things that APC is known for is being a connector, because we're stronger together.
Not only are we there for those who are suffering through substance use disorder, but we're there for family members, and we really take our job seriously.
We all have personal reason why we're in this field. We're changing people's lives one community at a time.